Welcome to VERSED, the ASCAP podcast. I'm Eric Philbrook. Summer is in full swing, and there is no place on earth that will be swinging harder this weekend than at the 2022 Newport Jazz Festival. Hot on the heels of the Newport Folk Festival, which featured a surprise performance by ASCAP living legend Joni Mitchell, the Jazz Festival is sure to hold surprises of its own. Coming up later, we'll talk to Michael R. Dudley, a recipient of this year's ASCAP Foundation Herb Alpert Young Jazz Composer Award. Michael has been selected to perform with his trio at this year's festival thanks to ASCAP's partnership with the Newport Festival Foundation. But first, it gives me great pleasure to introduce this conversation with five-time Grammy Award winner Esperanza Spalding and ASCAP's Eitan Rosenblum. A bassist, singer, songwriter, and composer, Esperanza has expanded her gifts to include work with fellow creators, teachers, and practitioners in various fields to explore the therapeutic potential of music. Her last two albums, 2018's 12 Little Spells and 2021's Songwrights Apothecary Lab, reflect this new direction in her evolution as an artist. She has written an opera with Wayne Shorter, which premiered in fall 2021 and is presently working with Harvard University to co-create and learn with students there. She is also set to grace the legendary Newport Jazz Festival Fort stage this weekend. Now, here is Eitan Rosenblum's conversation with the extraordinary Esperanza Spalding.
So Esperanza Spalding, thank you so much for joining us on VERSED, the ASCAP podcast.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So we're talking to you about a week before your set at the Newport Jazz Festival. I know this is not the first time you've performed. It's such a storied space for jazz music. What is special about Newport for you?
What's coming up right now is this Live at Newport performance with McCoy Tyner and Clark Terry. And they play this blues. It's called like Blues Stomp, I think. Yeah, I mean, I know there's many more stories about the space, but just personally, that is what's coming up for me, of just my connection to that recording, and maybe just one of the first festivals of that size that allowed for these encounters, between people in the field, in the constellation of musicians doing that art form. And personally, I've been invited a few times, so I just feel very grateful, to come offer where I'm at now.
Well, so tell me about that a little bit. I mean, you could draw from so many different eras of your career for your set. Can you give us a little preview of what's going to happen on your set this year?
Well, I'm playing duo with my longtime collaborator, Leo Genovese. I think it can be like a energetic palette cleanse, It's a really rich sound, between he and I. We're just two people, but we make a lot of sound, we make a lot of music, happen from the two of us. So I think it'll be engaging, it'll be sufficient from the musical perspective. I think just texturally, it'll be like a nice contrast to what I imagine a lot of other ensemble sounds will be. Mm-hmm.
So it's been 10 months since you released Songwrights Apothecary Lab, your last album. Like, for you, is there such thing as a creative fallow period where you're deliberately not making music?
And yeah, the fallow, quote unquote, period, that's just like breath. You know what I mean? It's like rest. It's like sleeping at night and being awake in the morning. And you're somehow, I think for many people, definitely for me, like the rest is often like a processing of what happened that day, or like what you were processing that day. So even if I'm not actively like, I am composing or I am practicing today, everything feels like it's directly related to, implicated in whatever musics or projects are in process at any given time,
So those rest periods where you're just processing whatever happened through the day, those can kind of become like rejuvenating to the creative well. It can sort of help you restore.
Yeah. Everything is helpful though. I think even getting burned out is helpful. That's important information too, you know what I mean? Like that, because it can help you learn your limits and your boundaries. I guess I just think like everything one does at any time is a part of the creative process, actually. And you might not know what it has to give until decades later. But I just think, you know, what we do is so much, it can't be anything less than a expression of who we are and where we're at. You know what I mean? Even if we're trying to exactly emulate somebody else, that says something still, you know, like everything is communicating who we are. So it's like, as long as you are, you're in your creative process. And so definitely everything and anything fuels, replenishes, fills that well, you know.
I love that idea. And it's helpful to sort of reorient, you know, my own my own sense of like what leads to creativity, or like how life and art are intertwined, you know.
It's the same word. I mean, it's the same. They're trying to describe the same thing. I'm looking right now at this yard, quote unquote yard, and they're like areas where we have tried to impose like our sense of beauty, you know, on it. And we cut things, we put coffee bags around the blueberries and like blah blah blah. And I'm just noticing like it's in a fallow state right now, you know, in terms of being tended by human hands. And it's so artistic, like where things come up, the composition of where these quote unquote weeds are, even the way the light is falling, like it's so beautiful. It is so beautiful. It's life. This is an expression of life in this place at this time. And it's artwork, you know what I mean? And I think we're all these organismic expressions of where we are too, you know, in our ancestral lineage or in a location, a physical location. Like our organisms are a beautiful expression of life itself. And that's what from these organisms that we try to make like other little entities called quote unquote art. But I feel that they're the same thing, you know what I mean? And like humans in a place making things are still kind of like an expression of life in that place. And maybe it's something about, at least to me, it feels like we don't have to worry about if we're efforting enough or being creative enough. Like we still are being artworks because we are. And when you like roll over into a phase where you're like, I'm going to be making things now, just something about, we can like relieve the pressure of thinking it's anything more than living. Ha! But it's more expensive maybe to put certain materials together than it is to just, you know, live a day.
So I imagine like with Songwrights Apothecary Lab, it's a very saturated thing. It's not just an album. That's just one manifestation of this work that you're doing with the whole network of musicians and therapists and neuroscientists and spiritual adventurers. What were the seeds of the project? Where did it begin?
I remember sitting in my apartment in Brooklyn sometime in 2018, maybe it was like April. And I was just like, I had just started learning about Reiki, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna do this album called 12 Little Spells. It just kind of like dinged 12 little spells, and each one is like a little spell for a body part to kind of bring like energy and awareness and try to invite your awareness to almost like recalibrate your relationship to a particular body part and for a moment, you know, while you're listening to the song. And then I think even getting into Reiki was kind of growing out of these few years, you could call it like a season of really starting to learn about the relationship between music and the body and recovery and resiliency and this very multi-purpose word called healing, multi-purpose word healing. And so in ways that I didn't notice, I think all of that kind of reading and study and listening and learning was informing 12 Little Spells. And I was also really interested about just like this practice called psychomagic. I think Alejandro Jodorowsky coined that term, and it's a much more ancient concept than how he's articulating it. But it's this idea that you can, like, with people's consent, use symbology and use a combination of symbols and sonic effects and textural effects to invite like a shift in sense or a shift in experience. And like I think that's like adjacent to how placebo can function for some people, you know what I mean? And I remember being very just interested about that capacity of our neurology, of our neurobiology to shift a sensory experience based on like input to the brain, like based on your senses, your sight and ear senses. That's so compelling. And I was thinking, well, I'm sure we're doing that anyway as creators. We're doing that for ourselves, and we're doing it kind of unconsciously when we try to make a certain sensory image with a lyric or something. And so I started wanting to become more adept at it and be in tutelage, you know, with people who were kind of applying those kinds of practices to support people, like to help people find more resiliency and flow in their beings, you know. So I guess I probably really started in 2016, but then 12 Little Spells was a kind of first foray of just starting to work with some of those ideas myself. And then during 12 Little Spells, I thought, oh, I want to actually study this. Like I was flirting with the idea of getting my master's in music therapy or something. And then I felt like actually the amount of time that I would spend doing that for 2 years just to have a piece of paper, I would rather spend that time, I think, like in the seat of my capacity right now, but as a collaborator with people who really are devoted to that path, you know, because it's such a devotion in being any kind of practitioner. So somewhere around, well, actually, I remember specifically 2020, February 2020, I remember sending this email to a few people that I had kind of come into contact with, asking if they would gather for a call and discuss how we can kind of make this environment for learning where they could counsel me and work with me as I tried to more intentionally and specifically work in elements of from like the therapeutic fields relating to music. And then one thing led to the next. And by the fall of 2020, we had, well, actually by the summer of 2020, we were doing our first Songwrights Apothecary Lab under a different name. And then it just kept kind of, yeah, growing from there. And it, you know, as things are step by step, you notice you notice what shape it wants to take.
You know, a lot about the Songwrights Apothecary Lab project, as you mentioned, it engages the idea of music as healing. And you can think about it from like the effects that music has on a listener, sure. But our audience for this podcast is songwriters and composers. You know, we're ASCAP. So can you talk a little bit about how or whether you think writing music, composing music, making music can also be healing?
Again, that word is it's such a catch-all word. So first, I think it's important for individuals and the people that they're collaborating with to be clear about their intended outcomes, you know, or even just shared intention of what we're showing up to this work for and what we're working towards together. Because that word, quote unquote, healing means so many different things to so many different people. First, it starts with maybe one's own definition of what that word is. And then I like this idea that we are our own laboratory. One of my teachers encouraged me to work with the tools that she was giving me in the laboratory of like my own sensory experience or experiencing in this life. And I think sometimes as musicians, because we do it so often, we forget that we have all these like tools and like concoctions and things in the lab already. So one of the like kind of like first things that I always holler about and advocate for is for beings who have access to these tools of music making, which all beings, but I'll say people who at least we identify as having access to tools of music making, like be daring in what we apply music for, you know, just like be audacious and ridiculous and have like crazy conceits. Like, I want to apply music to help me not be so annoyed with my cousin or whatever. And like just inviting the possibility that you have the capacity to show up with a musical response, even if it's just for yourself, like for your part of whatever's going on in your own body or relationally, or even like a circumstance like needing a new house or whatever, just like inviting the technology to show you kind of how you can work with it. So something about just like trying it, apply it to everything and anything and see what comes up and see what happens and start to learn that language, because it's like another language inside the language of music that we can play with and learn from.
I'm curious about what you're learning throughout this whole process.
Honestly, maybe the main thing I'm learning is that like this is really old news. This is like so basic, actually. It's like boring. It's so basic. The more I learn about how long this has been a curiosity and a focal point of humans in the field of making music and slash like showing up as a supporter for healing in community slash medical quote unquote doctors 500 years ago slash like it's so basic to the human experience that music would be applied for functions beyond enjoyment or like entertainment. So I think what I'm just learning is like, yeah, that's what of course I'm studying this. Like, yes, like, duh, of course, individuals in the medical field who are starting to like re-encounter this reality of the power of music in an era where maybe it's been quieted for a long time or it's not been considered real or important are going like, oh my God, we want to learn more. We want to measure it according to our metrics of understanding and like our metrics of reality and comprehension. It's like, yes, of course, because it's always been with humans. As far as we know, music has always been with us. It has always been applied as a therapeutic aid or literally like a therapeutic tool. So what there's never been a break, you know what I mean? Particularly if you look at like, I mean, nobody has the capacity to look at something like global practices of music, quote unquote, and healing. But like, I'm just seeing the continuum is so vast that it makes this work seem so regular schmegular. And it also somehow simultaneously is like, well, just like when you realize that you're in an art form that has a long history, and we all are in art forms that have long history, whether we can see the like track the ancestry back, before, let's say, a colonial state or something like the United States or something. They have ancientness. So something about sometimes when you notice that, it kind of makes you sit up straight and you're like, whoa, I want to show up correctly. Like I want to be thorough. Like I want to make sure that like I'm being a good student, not because you're going to get a bad grade, out of respect for all that's been left before you. You know what I mean? So that feels like a part of the learning of just like, whoa, this is so basic and what everybody has been doing since forever. And it's kind of silly that it requires so much framing in the current era to just try to almost like make a path of reckoning, and most importantly just for shared consent, because I want to be making sure that my intent is clear so that if people are opening themselves to what we've put into it, they know what we're saying and trying to do. You know what I mean? It's not like we're not being a creep or secretive about what we're exploring,
Even beyond what we're talking about, like music can be such a powerful channel for any message that you might have to give. I wonder, what do you think makes it such a powerful tool for spreading a message, whether it's a message of change or harmony or anger or anything?
That's a really good question. There's surely some neuroscientists who have a lot more that have things to say about that. Like, what does it have to do with our evolution? Like, what does it have to do with how this branch of mammalian species has evolved, you know. There's some polyvagal theory around how certain frequencies trigger a certain kind of like prioritizing of frequency that we let into our system. So like literally in the presence of certain frequencies, we're more likely to hear other frequencies and be affected, you know, be affected in our nervous system by those frequencies. So there's surely some, like, if you're curious about that, scientific insights about that anybody could probably look up online or through like the Cochrane database, but Cochrane Library database. And it makes me think of questions like, why is the Earth here? There was just this recent report about how there's way more like 10 times more galaxies than scientists originally thought. And then you think like, well, then why is Earth here? Like, why did Earth happen? And I feel like a question like, why does music work like that? There's something in pursuing that question, and there's beauty in like sitting before mystery, you know, and being like, this is so huge and so complex, and so the root of it is so unknown, and that's okay. And we can still witness patterns within this immensity and work with those patterns to try to improve our relationships to each other, to ourselves, and to our home, you know, this earth. And I feel that like that's where I'm most curious. That's where I find the most kind of like yum.
All right. I wanted to talk a little bit about education, like the process of it. Learning and teaching seem to be so core to who you are as a musical being. Can you talk about an experience you had as a student that shaped you as a music creator? It could be recent, it could be decades ago.
I was at in a workshop last summer. Ha! I was in a workshop last summer. What was the workshop? It was with Elder Maladona Somé. And there was this very diverse group of people all there to learn about this one dimension of Dagara cosmology and practice. And some people there are musicians, music teachers and music practitioners, songwriters, drummers, and most of the people wouldn't identify as musicians. They do other things. And often there would be this like drum circle at the end of the day. And I remember showing up to the drum circle, and a person who's now my good friend, but I didn't know then, was just playing this rhythm that was like, I was like, are you deaf? Like, can you not, are you rhythmically inept? Like, how can you? I was thinking that inside. I just like at shock at how out that rhythm felt. And they were just like playing it like, pa, really emphatically. And it was driving me crazy. You know what I mean? Not crazy, but it was really bothering me. And because of this teacher, our teacher in the space, who when allegorically similar things would be happening, like in conversation, our teacher would never be perturbed. It's like he trusted always that anything that was coming up, any subject, anything a person felt like they needed to say, it was somehow a part of like the total happening in that moment of the gathering. And I noticed many, many times in his company that he would just let things come in, like let things be said, let things linger out there that would seem like completely off color or off topic. And eventually like everybody would speak, and he would find this way to just like weave this total composition out of every disparate seeming thing that had been said. And it was always like so profound, you know, what he could see, the connection actually was between these seemingly like, woo, completely disparate things. And so I remember remembering that in the moment as I'm hearing this drum pattern, and I thought, okay, what if actually there's a much more complex rhythm that I can hear going on that does fit into. I just can't hear it yet. So before I played anything, I tried to like just assume that whatever my friend over here was playing worked. It did work. But there was this moment where like, letting go of where I thought things were supposed to be in this pulse where I was hearing it, there was like this other sense. There was other rhythmic fullness that was like, wow, doing another thing that I could play differently inside of. Not the thing that I thought I was supposed to play, but like I could play a thing that made sense with what was happening. You know what I mean? And that was like, whoo, such a gift, such a teaching and a teaching. And I think I'm still not great at that. You know, I'm still not good at that, even at that way of approaching sound or, you know, inter people phenomena. And I want to become good at that. And I feel how since then that the way that our teacher taught and that experience with the drumming has definitely informed how I like curate space or try to be in space with others in a position of leadership or like collective leadership. It was really powerful.
The way you described it, it almost sounds like that state you get to in the absolute best free jazz, where there is like an architecture to it if you're really listening for it. It's not just randomized. There's still call and response and musicians responding to each other in real time. It's just it's not like a subdivision of 4/4, you know, the entire time. You know, it's flow.
Well, also just like musics that we don't know, musics that are unfamiliar, you know. I think there's maybe I still assume I should be able to understand things just because they're there. And maybe part of it is also just like this might be beyond my comprehension, or this might be unfamiliar to me, and it doesn't mean that it doesn't make sense. So something about just like in general carrying that around and being like, this doesn't have to fit in my existing comprehension for it to be real or valuable or even for me to be able to participate in it, you know. And like that being an invitation to like widen the aperture of like A, patience, and B, just like witnessing, and C, listening, you know. Nice to meet you and talk with you.
Likewise, Esperanza, thank you so much for the time, and have a great one.
You too, bye.
Before he passed away, legendary Newport Jazz Festival founder George Wein partnered with ASCAP Foundation president Paul Williams to create a new opportunity to promote emerging jazz talent. So, for the last 6 years, Newport has selected a recipient of the ASCAP Foundation Herb Alpert Young Jazz Composer Award to perform as part of the Newport Jazz Festival. This year, that gifted artist is Michael R. Dudley. He's a trumpet player, composer, educator, producer, and arranger, and is set to perform on the Newport Foundation stage on Sunday, July 31st. He will also perform with the Maria Schneider Orchestra at the festival. He is the brightest of a new generation of jazz artists to carry on the legacy of Wein's vision. Now, here's ASCAP's Sarah Feingold and her conversation with Michael R. Dudley.
He is a trumpeter, he is an educator, he is a composer, and Michael Dudley has graciously given us some of his time today to chat with us. So welcome to VERSED, the ASCAP podcast. Thank you so much for being with us, Michael.
Thank you, Sarah. It's so nice to be here and to be able to talk with you this morning.
Yeah, so first and foremost, I'd just love to congratulate you on your ASCAP Foundation Herb Alpert Young Jazz Composer Award. That's a huge deal, really exciting. I wanted to ask you what this means to you right now in your career, in your creative pursuits. You know, what does this award mean to you?
The award means a lot to me. I I only really started pursuing composition maybe a few years ago, actually. So to reach this level of success, I guess, via the award and some of the other things I've been doing recently it's been incredibly validating and really has inspired me to just continue pushing through and to really hone in on what's important to me to communicate as a composer. So.
And your award-winning piece is titled Overture to the Before and After Times. I'd love to hear about that piece from you, about, the process of
Sure.
making it, what you're trying to communicate, how it feels.
Sure. So it originally was inspired by a prompt in which I looked at a piece of artwork, and right now the artist's name is escaping me, but I'll figure it out before we're done here. And so I was just inspired by the fluidity of the painting, and I saw all these kind of tendrils of color coming out. And so I thought about, I was also reflecting on the pandemic and how before the pandemic started, I think everyone was kind of in this almost rat race kind of, way of trying to get ahead and stuff. And I was still in school and trying to figure out how to, like, what was going to happen after I finished and everything. And then now that we're not necessarily on the other side, but, things are a little bit different than they were in 2020. I feel like there was kind of this release, and people are now much more cognizant of the time that they have and how they wish to spend it. And so that's kind of what I wanted to reflect in the piece.
Have you played this piece live a lot yet? Have you played it for crowds or anything? No?
No, it was entirely performed via remote recording. So I contacted people with a lot of my friends from the University of Miami, the Frost School of Music, where I went, and had people from DC and New York City and Miami, I think, record. And then I mixed it myself and submitted it for the competition. So
That's really special. It's like a whole, coming together from different. That's really beautiful. And you were selected to play at this year's Newport Jazz Festival at Fort Adams. Are you going to be playing this piece, or?
So I would love to, but the piece is actually the one that I wrote that won the award was for a large ensemble.
Okay.
So the amazing thing about this performance opportunity is that, like, I've really had to kind of pare things down because there are going to be 3 of us on stage. And so I've chosen some different things that I think kind of capture some similar kind of reflections, but yeah, well, hopefully at some point in the future, I'll be able to perform the piece.
Yeah, can you expand a little bit on, making those adjustments when you say, okay, I'm going to be here at Newport. I've been working on these big expansive pieces. Have you also been working on stuff with fewer people, smaller scale things, or is this something you had to focus on scaling up and down for playing live again?
I would say that I do work on different things even at the same time. Just like with any other kind of work, it can be hard to really just focus on one, or at least for me, it's kind of hard to focus on one piece for a very extended period of time. So maybe I'll work on that larger piece, and then, the next day I'll be feeling differently and kind of thinking about different things. So I'll be working on a different piece that maybe is more scaled down, but still kind of conquers some big things.
Yeah, just following the inspiration, not trying to force it or anything like that. Right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And have you ever been to the Newport Jazz Festival? Do you have any context for it?
No, this is my first time. I'm very excited, and I think it's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place. This really special. Is there anybody who's going to be there that you're really excited to see play, or that you might want to try to meet and talk with?
Yeah, so I'm actually performing in in another set before the set with my group. And so I'm really excited to be doing that. It's with the Maria Schneider Orchestra.
Cool.
So that's kind of one of the things I'm looking forward to the most, just because it's been so much fun to play her music and with the other musicians in the band. And then, of course, getting a chance to see the multitude of groups that Christian McBride's going to be playing and being a part of. I'm really excited about that. So
I'd like to move this conversation a bit to education.
Sure.
It seems like you've had a lot of formal education. You've also had a lot of practical education. It seems like you've played with a lot of different people, learned from a lot of different folks, and you are yourself an educator. So you also engage with people in that way. And I wanted to ask you if there's something that you've learned in your education, whether that's practical or formal, that you find is particularly valuable to you, that you revisit every day.
Sure. I think the biggest thing that comes to mind right now is that every student is different. And what works for one student might not work as well for another. And that's not just about the content and the lessons that you wish to teach them, but also just the way that you relate to students. And it's helped me understand myself more and all the students and other faculty members that I relate to and have a great time with on campus. So.
I was also wondering if there's something that you try to impart in your students, if there's, a certain value, or if there's skills that you try to specifically make sure that they come away with.
Right now, I feel like an important value to instill within students is hope, honestly. And hope as something that inspires like drive to just, first of all, continue studying and finishing school, and then continuing with music or something adjacent to music afterwards, or at least continuing to appreciate music after graduating. Because I think when people are in music school, they kind of think that like, oh, if I don't do music, then I've failed or something like that. And I feel like that's not true at all. As long as you're, as a student, you're happy just with whatever direction your life is taking, that's really the ultimate payoff. So that's kind of what I want students to know from me.
Another question I have is, what is exciting for you in the jazz world right now? Is there a direction it's moving, or a movement, or just something that's going on that you think is really incredible and is moving jazz in the right direction?
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of people who are inspired by the environment and our natural world, and using that not in a gimmicky way, but really trying to understand how that informs their artistry and just the way that they live every day. And that to me is very inspiring, and it's something that I've been kind of thinking about recently, and seeing companies like, I think it's Biophilia Records that uses like eco-friendly packaging and materials to make the CDs and whatnot, that if people use CDs anymore, I don't know, but ways for us to listen to music and feel good about the impact that we're having, or that we're not having as much of an impact on our world as I think that we have had in the past. So
even beyond jazz or even music, is there other art right now that you think is super exciting in that way, that really got you fired up, or you thought, wow, this is super special?
This sounds like it might be a interesting answer, but recently I've been trying to take up gardening. So I think if I could find some form of, maybe sculpture art that kind of uses live plants, that would be very interesting. And I want to, now that I'm thinking about that, it's like I need to look up some artists who kind of work with media like that. So
That's so interesting. Yeah. Have you ever heard of, I know the only one I can think of off the top of my head is Andy Goldsworthy.
no, but that I'll have to check out.
It's the most incredible stuff. It's these photographs of like, he makes these incredible structures with sticks and leaves and all the things naturally. And then they do these incredible things with the environment where they'll reflect and, create an entire shape, or he'll have things on the ground that will stay there during a rain or a snow. Then they'll be removed perfectly, nothing around it. It's really special. I think that you'd enjoy it based on what you were just saying about gardening.
Yes, I will definitely check all that out.
My mom has an incredible green thumb, but like, I don't have the space, or I hope one day I can cultivate it. But like right now, I just kill everything when we bring it to her apartment. It's not great. So I was curious if you have something on your plate that's sort of your next big challenge, whether it's something that you want to do or it's something that you're currently working on.
Sure. So I would say my next big challenge is to really kind of invest myself in the community that I'm in right now. I was a visiting assistant professor this past year at the Crane School of Music at SUNY Potsdam, and I will be starting in the fall with a tenure track position there. So I'm really excited about my future at that institution, and I really have been like very much accepted by the community there and feel like we've become kind of a family of sorts. And so I'm really excited about trying to do more there and see what the future holds for us.
And I know that educators are really life-changing people, whether they're formal educators or people who just teach you things. I was wondering if there are people in your life who have taught you or helped you in your career who you wanted to shout out right now as just really fantastic educators or influential people in your life.
Absolutely. I mean, the list is so long that it probably would take, too much time for me to go through all the amazing teachers who've influenced me. But one of the teachers who've influenced me has been my high school jazz band director, Todd Hartman. He really inspired me and a lot of other students to continue with music. And we had an amazing experience when I was in high school. We went to the Essentially Ellington Festival in New York City. Yeah, and it was really cool to meet a lot of musicians my age who were also very interested in continuing and pursuing music as a career. So that was a very formative experience for me. And then another educator who I'm actually teaching with at this academy in Aspen is my former trumpet teacher, Brian Lynch, who's the professor of jazz trumpet at the Frost School of Music. And Brian has been a great mentor and teacher and friend to me, and has inspired me to not only continue to play trumpet, but also continue to do work as a composer and orchestrator, and that, I can do both, and they can both be very rewarding experiences for me. So that was great to hear.
Yeah, and clearly other people think your composition work is excellent because it's getting awards, and that's pretty cool. This might be a question you've gotten before, but do you remember why trumpet? I don't know if you started too young to even remember why, or if you start.
I do. No, I remember. I actually wanted to play saxophone, and there were too many saxophone students already who had signed up. So that it was procrastination. That was why I chose trumpet, because they were like, you had to choose another instrument. And so I did that, and then now the rest is history. And it's been great. I really got into lead trumpet playing and listening to a lot of big band records and trying to play along to the Thad Jones Mel Lewis band and the Gordon Goodwin's Big Fat Band out in LA, and even some of the stuff for the Maria Schneider Orchestra as well. And so I don't regret procrastinating in that instance. So
It was meant to be. It was beshert, as my people would say. Another question. Do you remember, and you might not have a memory of this, but do you remember the first time you heard somebody or saw somebody just wailing on the trumpet and you were like, wow, I got to be that. Like, that's what I want to do.
That's a good question. I would say a lot of those kinds of experiences for me actually happened when I was just in middle school, and it was just people within my community. There's a big band in Cincinnati called the Blue Wisp Big Band, and they would perform every Wednesday night at the club called the Blue Wisp, which is now unfortunately closed down. But I would go see them and just be so inspired by the feel of everything and how everyone was having such a good time. So that was probably the best instance of that, and just being like, I want to do that, you know.
Yeah, I love that. That's beautiful, being inspired in your own backyard. It all starts at home.
Mm-hmm.
Well, those are all the questions that I have for you, Michael. I really appreciate you joining us. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you. This whole entire experience has been an amazing honor, and I'm very excited about the festival and the performance and just what comes next.
So excited for you to tear it up at Newport. Break a leg.
Well, that's a wrap for this episode. Before I go, I want to remind you that the ASCAP experience continues to offer inspiring and educational conversations with some of today's top music creators and industry experts. It's all year long and it's all free. Watch sessions on demand and RSVP for future sessions at ascapexperience.com. What are you waiting for? Thanks to everyone who made this episode possible. Esperanza Spalding and Michael R. Dudley for being our guests, Sarah Feingold and Eitan Rosenblum for editorial support, Tiffany Sims for graphic design, Kate Cordova for social media, MXM Tune, Rosalind Scher, and Kellen Pomeranz for our cool theme music, and Benjamin Keynes of Sight Sense Productions for audio and video editing. If you like what you hear on VERSED, tell your friends, comment on our YouTube channel, and share the podcast to help spread the word and grow our community. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you next time.